I think he's there. Super producer Rick, as usual, was holding us together with sticky tape.
Thank
From
you for
Lexicon
thank you for
Digital.
having me on the show.
How are you, mate? Good to see you. Good to see
Good,
you.
good.
Now, tell us, for those of us who haven't come across Lexicon Digital, quietly building, a bit of a business over there. What's
The Empire.
The Empire?
Yeah.
What's Lexicon
The
Digital
Empire.
all about? Give us a little overview.
Oh, look. So really, look, we're a software consultancy. And if I can put it in the most simple terms, we're a software consultancy that really specialises in software engineering, design, and delivery. And that's kind of the what we do. I think what if I kind of lift that conceptually a little bit higher and think about why it is that, and we'll talk about the big firms in a moment, buy our services, is that I think what we're actually doing is teaching organizations how to leverage software for competitive advantage. Like the more we go into this kind of culture of digital and technology, the more that software is actually enabling businesses to compete. We can only see what's happening right now in the retail sector, and how the bricks and mortar businesses are closing their doors, and companies that have been set up and where there's been 10 years spent of investment in selling online, their share prices are up 200% or so in a market such as this. So I think as a consultancy, that's primarily what we do. Probably want just to challenge a few notions I think that were raised, before obviously the introductions, which I wanted to talk about first, and then I can tell you what I think actually
We're going to have a debate today. Good.
Yeah, a healthy debate. Let's have a healthy debate.
We love a healthy debate, mate. All right, so
I think.
No, he's going. Sorry, keep going, Christopher.
Yeah, no,
by all means.
I'm off. So, I think thinking about your customer is obviously extremely important, but it's certainly in the early days of building a business, I think there's some fundamental things that you've really got to kind of look yourself in the mirror and see, be true to what it is that you're building. And I think customers inadvertently come to that because, if you're building something that's where you've got a passion for what it is that you do, that you've demonstrated that you have a history of being a master at your craft, and you can credentialize that with your customers through all the different experiences that you've had. I think timing is obviously a thing that's important in any sector, in any industry. There was the old story of Steve Jobs with the iPhone, that he decided at one point to do nothing because the technology wasn't there at the time, and he just waited until it was. And when he made that move, obviously the rest is history as we know it. But I think these are the things, and like I think you referred to them, Laura, as the DNA of your business. That if you invest the time in getting these things right, you start to build a proposition that is high quality, high caliber. People believe what it is that you're selling, and whether that's clients or candidates that are coming to work for you. And then I think obviously execution is like a massive part of it. So having an idea is like, the old saying, 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration.
Yep.
Well, if you think about that in a little bit more detail, most ideas are bad ones. And if your execution approach actually is sound, you're more likely to find out early on that the idea that you thought was a good one was actually a waste of time. And good businesses are able to pivot and adapt their proposition over time till they land in a position where they've got the right product to offer the customer or service. And I think, so execution is not just about working harder or even smarter for that matter than everyone else. It's also making sure that you're adopting some of these methods, like we teach our clients, to be able to compete in this market.
So you're being coachable.
The other thing, absolutely. And then I think as far as clients go, particularly the big boys, I think there's never been a better time to work with these companies like your tier 1, your tier 2s, because they actually have realized that they cannot move at the rate of knots that they need to be able to compete with all these other technology startups that are disrupting their industries. And they're trying to respond to that in various ways, and they're doing that by setting up their own incubators and innovation hubs and all these different things. Acquisitions obviously is another strategy, but the other thing that's happening is that they're actually partnering with smaller firms who are high caliber and capability that can bring that IP into their business and actually teach them how to adapt and respond to change. Because we fundamentally believe that is competitive advantage in this market. It's no longer about just having an idea and it most likely being the right thing. It's more about really just understanding that you need to get feedback from your customers as quickly as you possibly can. And when we build software, rather than spending 6 months documenting an idea and then spending 3 months or 4 months building it and then putting it out in the market and realizing that no one actually cares, we tend to do that in 2 weeks.
Yep.
And we do that every 2 weeks. And what tends to happen over time is the final product is not even what the customer actually expected. It's probably not what we expected, but it tends to be what their customer expects, because through that whole process, it's constantly being validated through, things I won't obviously go into with the time that we've got. Yes. But it's certainly becoming like the gold standard in how businesses operate, and the software industry itself has been primarily responsible for, I guess, creating that as a set of methods, if you like. So now the challenges with big business is how do we take those things that we're doing in software now, and generally, for the most part, people are still doing them poorly, because the other challenge is that a lot of these things are, things that rely on mindset. A lot of the big firms have tried to commoditize those things, and I always say they've taken the adjective and turned it into a noun and then capitalized it and put it in a box and sold it and said, now you're agile. But that's actually not the case. It's a long journey, and it requires a shift in mindset, and that takes time. So I think going back to the point just about, the big boys, if you like, they are like more open than they've ever been to working with smaller companies, purely for the purpose of getting more momentum and velocity into their organizations, because they've realized that it's not about having the right idea, it's about execution, and it's about testing the idea, getting feedback, refining the proposition, and then making a decision at some point that it's either it's got legs and you should keep investing, or you should actually park
your losses. Yeah.
So Chris,
cut your losses and move on.
Do you think it's the case that it's all of a sudden changed? Because I mean, okay, so let's say you've gone from very small business to a medium-sized business in only a few years. You're dealing with, and this is just from the outside looking in, you're dealing with tier 1 clients, and you're building an absolutely elite team within Lexicon Digital. I mean, there's just no getting around either of those three things as in unarguable facts. Do you think it's because you've built a team that competes with, the traditional bigger suppliers that is why you're in the game? Or do you think it's that you think you've found the answer to the question that has yet to be answered?
Well, I think through, again, going back to like principles and mastering your craft and really valuing the quality of the service that you provide, you're inadvertently attracting more of the top talent, engineering talent and otherwise into your organization that don't want to go and work for these bigger firms because they're not able to operate in the same way that we can. Like, people want to be working in cross-functional teams, delivering, working software every 2 weeks. And for the most part, the business model, if you like, is one that, the likes of the high street consultancies really try and shy away from, because they've got so much overhead and expense and cost in their business that it doesn't make commercial sense for them to run projects that way. So if you can demonstrate to your tier 1 and your tier 2 clients that you have that capability and you're able to get results quickly, and whatever it is that you're building is done to an exceptional degree of quality, I don't think they tend to care now about whether it's an Accenture or a Deloitte or a Lexicon. What they want is top pedigree talent delivering value as quickly as possible, and obviously at the highest degree of quality.
No, and that's you've clearly been able to do that. I mean, in a short period of time, you've grown a very serious business.
Yeah, and one thing I think I've left out in that is, probably the most important thing since I've started the company, and this applies internally within the business and externally, is this notion of trust. And I think it's the only non-monetary exchange in any relationship. And so, if you're a good business person and you have a good proposition, and your intent is to provide a good service, and your intent is also to treat your staff in the right way, then trust just tends to propagate, through your organisation, with your people, with your clients, and it makes conversations about, you talked earlier about branching out into different areas of the business and doing a whole bunch of other things. Well, that's all based on trust, right? Like, you don't, yes, you have to have a capability and it has to be obviously sound, but ultimately you need to be able to build trust with people, and it becomes very clear very quickly in relationships when I think people can and can't be trusted. And I never make promises that I can't keep. When we make a commitment, we obviously deliver to it.
Because
and
I think
we're very careful about doing that.
Traditionally, Chris, wouldn't you think that the bigger consulting firms get trust from their clients just because they're big? So you're a big, I'm a big client. I've got lots of money. I'm just going to go with the big guys because I just trust that
incumbency.
They're big, so they must be. Whereas you're saying if you can demonstrate and give that trust at an actual personal level, that you can displace that and say, well, trust us. We don't have the name yet. We're getting there, but trust us, we will deliver. And that's getting you in the door and actually building these great relationships.
Yeah, and I think it's even a slight variation of that, which is that there's an old saying in the industry that no one ever got fired for hiring IBM. So you can flip the trust thing there and say, well, actually, it's more of a protectionist thing. Like we chose the high street, the big boys, and they didn't deliver. So it couldn't possibly have been anything to do with anything that we had. Like, wasn't us. Is where we're of the view with the way that we work and the way that we mitigate like risk on a project, because we deliver software every 2 weeks. Like, we don't have any other metric other than delivering software to the client. So, reporting and all these other things, whilst we do some of that stuff, it's not, we don't invest time in it. We invest time in engineering, and we invest time in showing the client that they've actually got a product within a fortnight. And, it's amazing within the space of, 4 to 6 weeks, the trust base just goes through the roof.
Has it got an outcome?
And they're not even asking questions anymore about, budgets and timelines, because you're going back to them every 2 weeks and you're showing them a chart that shows them, you're showing them in 6 months' time that you might be a week late. Now, what normally happens with the big boys is that the project gets 2 months or 1 week out from implementation,
then they find out.
You get told that you're going to be 6 months late.
Yep.
And then that manager has to go back and ask their boss for another $1 million. And they're the problems in big business that really, are a cause for concern. If you're telling someone 5 months out that you need another $250,000 to finish the project, in the scale of these organisations, it's a much easier conversation to have.
When there's no surprises.
No surprises.
Now, I'm just conscious we're running out of time, but we're really interested in the talent side of your business. And I know that's always been so important to you. So, talk us through how you've built up, pushed up your talent average and how that's changed from day one to where you're at now. We're really interested in the talent side.
Yep. So I think early days I was fortunate enough to have a few people that I was surrounded by that I trusted that were exceptionally good. But it was also very hard to try and bring other people who we didn't know to a business that was relatively small, unknown, maybe had one client. You know, these were all the early days where you're kind of trotting through the mud, to grow your business. But at some point when you continue to invest in your business and you continue to invest, whether that's in marketing, in your people, in all these other things, you start to build a bit of a reputation. And what that means then is that you start to tap in. What I've noticed over, say, 4 to 5 years is that all of a sudden the caliber of the talent that you start tapping into just starts to get better and better and better, because you become the shiny new toy in town, and people are more interested in wanting to come and work for you. So there's that part of it, and then of course there's the vetting of people and making sure that they are fit to do the kind of work that we do. So all of our software engineers go through the ringer in terms of coding challenges and multiple interviews. Like our non-technical people go through role-playing exercises, simulating real client engagements, and they're probably harder than any engagement that they'll ever go into with a client. So we're fairly confident that if they get through those, then they're probably in good stead to be able to go to a client and demonstrate to their capability to a high standard.
No, I think that's fair, and that's a lot of time invested up front. But you're talking about longer term outcomes, and I mean, even if just someone looked at your LinkedIn feed, Lexicon Digital's LinkedIn feed, you can just see it seems like someone's starting there every week, and they seem to be people of very good caliber. So you're doing something right there, Chris. That's working out quite well. All right, in sort of 1 minute or less, tell me how your role has changed over the last 4 or 5 years from, being a one-man band, sort of playing all the instruments, to now whatever you're doing.
Yep, no, that's a good question. So I think there's a few things. One is I was definitely too far in the business as opposed to being on it in the early days, and that made it a bit of a seesaw to try and, I think with business, you're constantly trying to break out of orbit into these kind of larger spaces, and it takes time. And how do you do that? Well, eventually you have to bring in other people operationally to help you run the business, because you can't do it. You can't run a company of 60 to 100 people and be this central point of dependency to do everything. You need other smart people who are highly capable in their own right, and probably more capable than you are at certain things, to be able to help scale the business. And there was no more apparent to me that that was the case when I managed to work closely with a business partner, and the business just then went on another trajectory after that, because that person brought a whole bunch of diversity into the business that was beyond anything that I had, and the two of the things together just, it's hard to say. There's no real science to it.
Chris,
Chris,
we have to wind this up, because as usual we've run right out of time, mate. Thank you. Chris Carydias, Lexicon Digital. He's done a wonderful job today. Thank you, mate. Laura Racky, well done today. No Racky rants. We'll probably bring one in next week. Thank you very much to everyone for watching, and we'll be back next week.